Hi, I'm Bill Morris. I'm a cartoonist and illustrator, and you're listening to GuildCast.
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.
Introspection, some self-reflection.
Definitely.
To find out, okay, what are the causes? Why am I feeling this way? Whether it's all the time or whether it's once in a while. Is it truly anxiety, or do I just allow myself to get nervous? Either way, a lot of this can be controlled, but it takes some self-reflection to figure this out.
Did you know that 40 million Americans currently live with anxiety? In recent years, the Guild hosted a series of community conversations called Member Connect, where we would invite special guests and speakers to share with our members based on different topics important to our personal growth and professional goals.
Well, I can remember it was June in 2006 when our airplane landed at the local airport, and we had returned home from serving 18 months on a combat duty for the Army. I was 13 months in the city of Ramadi in Iraq in 2005 and 2006. And at the time, it was considered the most dangerous place on the planet. I happened to be a combat medic, so it was first and foremost up front and in my face with all the worst that humanity has to offer me, and death and destruction. And as a leader in that environment, I also had to put up with a sense of loneliness as well, and that was equally challenging. Even though I had people all around me, I hadn't seen my family on months on end, and that had some very long-lasting effect. So when I came home, I kind of thought in my mind that when we landed, I would feel, elation. We see those black and white videos of World War II veterans and with the streamers flying and how they're so happy to see their families and everything. And it's a celebration. I was envisioning that would happen, but when I landed, I felt none of that. I think that was the first red flag. Now, don't get me wrong. I was happy to see my family. I was happy to be home, but I didn't feel that elation and sense of relief. And so that was kind of the first red flag. About 3 months after I got home, into my transition back into the real world. Now, keep in mind, I was a National Guardsman at the time, so I came from serving 18 months in active duty, and I had to transition back into a civilian life. It was very difficult. About 3 months into it, my life started to kind of unravel, and I realized how much I'd been affected by being in that environment. So sure enough, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a form of anxiety, actually.
Yeah.
But didn't really, at that time, still didn't understand. We heard about it. We talked about it. I was a medic. We had to deal with it as, care providers, but I really didn't understand what it was going to do to my life and how it was going to affect me. And so for about 11 years, it affected me in a negative way. Now, I remained functional. I found, I went to work. I, engaged with my family, but that was all kind of just external motions. It really wasn't what was happening to me, inside. And those things were kind of boiling up and bubbling over and causing behaviors that were unhealthy. And I came home, probably some of the best physical condition that I was in. And 11 years later, I found myself sitting in my easy chair in the living room at almost 290 pounds.
Oh, wow.
and sedentary. And, it just came to me one day that what's going on? I need to take control of my life, because basically what I'm doing is I'm just letting myself fail.
Yeah.
For some reason, I guess I was sitting there and I realized that, I was 53 at the time. And I thought, wow, my daughter is 23, and that 23 years went by so fast. I'm not even sure I'm going to be here another 23 years.
Right.
And that kind of struck me real. And so I needed to do something. I needed to figure this out. So part of that, part of that, I guess, condition that I was in was that I didn't really want to feel that there was anything wrong. That I was hoping that one day it would just go away and I would just kind of be myself. And then, that came to that realization. And then, when you come right down to it, hope's not a strategy, right? Hope isn't going to get you someplace that you need to be. You've got to have some action, And so, so I had to start really thinking about how I was going to address this issue. So the first thing that I had to do is realize that, that anxiety is a real thing. I never was like a firm. I was involved with physical health care, and I never really thought too much about mental health, and I never really took it that seriously, to be honest with you, until I started to experience it myself. And so you have to realize that, it's a real thing. It's a real. This is real, and it's it's more than just being nervous or uncomfortable, right? It's kind of that constant feeling of excessive fear or worry. It's not always there, but this is for me, of course. But it's triggered by something that has evolved from these events in my past.
Yeah.
And ignoring it didn't make it go away. So now I had to figure out how to make it go away, or at least how to deal with it. Because I think the thing is that, despite it, being it's a real thing, it's controllable and manageable. As long as it's not a systemic form of anxiety that requires medication or something. In fact, anxiety, there's 40 million Americans who suffer from anxiety, yet only a third of them reach out and decide to do something about it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's a lot more prevalent than we think. And those of us who suffer from it, we can kind of be reassured that we're not alone, even though you feel alone,
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who understand, where we are and how to deal with that, or that we're struggling. 10% of 10% of children in America suffer from anxiety, which I'm not sure if that's a really good reflection of how we're raising our kids these days.
That's true.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then there's this is a statistic that says that 1 in 13 people on the face of the earth suffer from anxiety. So this is a pretty common issue that we experience that many people don't address. Or maybe you have a way that some folks address it and would be willing to share. So I'm willing to share with what works for me.
Yeah.
And so as I sat there in the easy chair, not feeling so easy that day, thinking, okay, what am I going to do? What I realized was that this was not a weight issue. I had lost weight before I could, exercise and lose weight almost, pretty easily, but then it would come back. So I had to realize that this was not simply a weight issue. This was not because I was being lazy. This was not because, for any other reason except I had to think that there was other causes to it. And what I realized after doing some deep thinking, and this is, and it really does require some introspection, some self-reflection.
Definitely.
To find out, okay, what are the causes? Why am I feeling this way? Whether it's all the time or whether it's once in a while. Is it truly anxiety, or do I just allow myself to get nervous? Either way, a lot of this can be controlled, but it takes some self-reflection to figure this out. So, and that sounds like a tall order. So I did what I do, and I created a system. I'm really good at breaking things down and building them back up. That's one thing that I'm quite good at. And so I decided to create a system for myself based on what's called the wellness wheel. And the wellness wheel is essentially somewhere between 6 and 12 different components of your self-being that you can analyze. I thought 6 or 12 was way too many moving parts for this guy. Yeah. So I broke it down to 5 parts. And I started looking at those 5 parts. And I actually, with 5, if I decided to put a score on each one of those parts, being 1 to 20, 1 being, very bad and 20 being very good, I could actually score myself on a scale of 100 to kind of see where I was, hold myself accountable to trying to make myself better, find out where my weaknesses are, and start concentrating on those weaknesses.
Right.
So I decided to create 5 categories of self, which would be the physical part of you, the emotional part of you, the relational part of you, the spiritual part of you, and then there's a vocational part of you. And I can talk about each one of those in a second. But then there's, and then there's some things that you can do in order to concentrate on each one of those elements as you go forward to help control your environment. Because basically anxiety is either triggered by something in your life or something from your past. Right. So if you can control those things or understand what those things are, or when those things happen, you can control your emotions or your state of mind better, then you have a better chance of controlling that level of anxiety to a point where it's manageable and doesn't take over your life. And for me, I consider my anxiety my enemy quite literally, because of the position I was in, the exposure to an enemy that caused my post-traumatic stress. I feel like this is an extension of that enemy. And so when I decided to post myself up against anxiety, I was really creating a defense against my enemy in a mindset that I'm not going to let that enemy win. Because where I was in Iraq, I lost 16 of my comrade friends.
Wow.
Many others injured. I was exposed to a multitude of civilians who were killed and maimed, and this had lasting effect. Looking back, it's no wonder, more people didn't have issues, and so this is my enemy. Anxiety is my enemy, and this is how I combat it. Okay, so looking at myself, when I say your physical self to reevaluate, you really have to get deep. You have to be willing to do the deep work. You have to be willing to be honest with yourself, but not blame yourself. When you're looking, at your components, what makes you you, and it's certainly okay to have others involved with that, but it's really important that you dig deep into yourself to realize, who you are. And it's good. It's easier to do that when you break it down into these segments. At least it was for me. So the physical part of me was, is like my physical health. Where am I? I was not in a good place. I was 290 pounds. I had obstructive sleep apnea. My sleep exam showed that I stopped breathing over 200 times each night. And if it wasn't for a machine that helped force air into my lungs, that I would stop breathing. And I mean, I was in a bad place. I was a collegiate athlete and a warrior. I was in really good condition, and now to be here, I did not realize how low I had sunk in my health. Just thinking that I was getting older, and this is where I'm going to be, the old guy relegated to rocking in the rocking chair on the, front porch watching the grandkids play in the yard. That's kind of where I was in my mind, but that's not really who I wanted to be. So you had to look at my health. Where am I? Part of that is, what is my nutrition? What am I putting in my body? And to think about that. What are those habits? What are my habits in activity? What can I do, to improve those activity type of habits? And what can I do, instead of sitting around so much? What can I do? Let's look at what I like to do, and let's go out and get busy doing some of those things.
The 16th edition of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines by the Graphic Artists Guild is now available on Amazon and www.graphicartistsguild.org.
Right. So then I had to look at my emotional side. I think the physical side is probably one of the easier ones to see, or to talk about, and to evaluate, because it's more tangible. Emotional, not so much, but it comes down to one question. Am I happy? Mm-hmm. And I don't mean, am I joyful or can I laugh? I did those things. I loved being with my grandchildren. I'd laugh at something funny on TV, but then I had to think about it. Was I happy? Was I content with my life? Did I like where I was? Did I feel like I was in a good place? What was my state of mind? I was not happy. I was depressed a lot. And did I have a sense of empathy for other people? Did I care for other people and other things around me? Did I just, did I give a right?
Definitely.
And then did I have a sense of self-control over this, or did I just let things go? What's your emotional state? So you can look at those things and kind of grade yourself. Where am I in that scale of 1 to 20? Relationally, who are your friends? Did you have friends? What's your relationship like with your spouse? Your family members, your coworkers? How interactive are you socially? I think those are really important. When I looked at myself, I really didn't hang out. I didn't do anything socially. For a long time, I had acquaintances, but I wouldn't call them my friends. And my family really were my friends, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to have friends outside the circle. You just have to have that kind of, that wide support besides just family. You have to have somebody else you can lean on besides family that sees things in a different perspective, than your family might. And I didn't have any of that interactive wise. I was sitting in a chair I'm watching TV all the time. I didn't interact with anybody except my family. And, they usually were there, and we, watch TV together and eat together. That wasn't working, and with that, sometimes you are with friends or with other people with family, and maybe they're not the ones you need to be with, because maybe they're adding into, poor behavior, poor physical behaviors, or maybe they are not adding to you. You want to be hanging around people that are going and doing things that are going to be adding value to your life. If they're sucking the life out of you, if they're taking away that value, then you're opening yourself up completely to be in a state of mind, or to allow something like anxiety and depression to rule who you are, instead of you control what can so easily control you. So the spiritual side of things, usually when I say spiritual, every first thing people say is, well, I go to church, or they assume it's a religious thing. And I don't mean religion or faith. Now, I will say that I am a faithful person, and faith is important to me. But that's not what I mean when I talk about the spiritual side of yourself. It's kind of that, it's kind of the intangible thing. It's the heart of a person. It's like, where do I go and what do I depend on when I'm in my low point? Where do I go? What do I do to pull me out of it? If I have nothing else left, what's that firewall that's saving me from just, falling off the edge? That usually comes from your spirit, your will. What is that part of you? Where do you find that sanctity? Are you present within yourself? And do you feel worthy? That's all part of your spiritual self. I get a lot of that from my faith, but there's other ways to get it. I started meditating. I started doing other things. Some people like music that brings them to a safe place of sanctity. That's kind of what, do you have that in your life? And then the final thing, I call it your vocational self. What it is it's your why. So what's that provisional part of you? What are you doing for others? What it gives you this sense of purpose. What are you contributing? What are your skills? What are your passions? What's your purpose? And if you're not feeling any of that, or you don't have that in your life, then, I think that could be a huge void. That could be really a dangerous place. For me, when I did my scoring, I can remember when I did all my scoring, my score out of 100, I was probably really hard on myself because that's what I tend to be. It came out to be a 44. I can remember that. Oh. And the highest point that I had was my vocational category, because I had a really good job at the time and was doing things that I like to do. But then I realized as I started working on the other sides that it was my vocational side that was actually, although it was the highest at the time, it was not genuine. It was really wasn't my strong point. It really turned out to be the weakest side of me. Wow. I wasn't really doing what I love to do, what I wanted to do. That's kind of why I got into, more into the coaching and helping others from that point, because I continued to self-reflect and be honest with myself and work on myself. And I have to tell you, the one thing I realized is about anxiety is, even though you can work to mitigate its effect on you, for me anyway, it's not going away. Yep. It's always present. And I know that I have to have this warrior spirit and the self-discipline that even those days that I don't want to get out of bed and I feel stress about, leaving the house, I get up, I get out of bed, and I leave the house. So I fight back. Right. So we have to that's part of us too. But if we work on each one of these 5 elements, it makes, as we work on one, it makes the other one better. Right. So as I was working on my physical self and I entered into a better eating regimen. And the good thing was that I was doing this with my wife, and and our relationship started improving. So that made me, I think, my emotional side and my spiritual side become a little better. I found a church that I really liked. That was a modern church that was just really supportive and non-judgmental, and I felt at home there. And then because I started to work on my faith, I met new people, and so now my relationship side of things started to improve. With that, my emotional side, and then when I felt like I had more purpose, then I had more reason to eat healthy and to exercise more. And I started to embrace each one of those. And so that just, they all created this synergy within each other that really helped me be able to control and manage the times when anxiety does come into my life. I used to have problems basically on a daily basis, and now not so much. And I started doing other things. I started to create some habits that were really good. Like regimen and ritual is a really good thing. Doing things that are healthy and good for you on a routine basis will keep you in that positive mindset. You fall out of those rituals, and you tend to kind of slide backwards a little bit, you know? And I've done that too. It's hard to maintain that sometimes. But one thing that I learned to do that I never thought I would do before, I mentioned it before, is I like to meditate or self-reflect, like purposely. Sometimes that's with music. Sometimes I started doing aromatherapy. I mean, people who know me would not even believe I would do this, because I was like, that was to me, that was like the hippie dippiest thing that I could ever, you know, to do. But now I embrace it and I find the value in it. You know, and so I do it, and because it just helps me as part of my regimen and ritual that it's a go-to. You know, I know that when I start being anxious, if I breathe properly and calm myself down and realize why I'm feeling that way, whether it is, you know, a deadline or, I think my coworkers aren't going to be happy with my performance, or, whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's ridiculous stuff. But it gets me going. If I just take that second, slow down, you know, think it through it, control what you can control. That's really the key, to understand that whatever, you know, control what you can, what you can't, let it go, because it's going to happen anyway. And have this ritual. So in the mornings, I usually get up. Well, it's still dark now here in New Hampshire and cold. Typically, I would get up and exercise or something. I'd love to go for a run. I'm a runner, and I haven't done much running because I hurt my back, which threw a big monkey wrench into my ritual, which I slid back a little bit because of it. But I really do like to exercise in the morning. I usually I started journaling, which is another thing I never thought I would do, even though I love to write. Goofy, right? I love to write, but I never liked to journal. Yeah. But I've started to, and you can see that was a very helpful tool for me. And it's a quick journal too. It's 5 minutes in the morning. It's 5 minutes at night. It allows me to write down how I feel in the morning and then reflect on it in the evening. And so it's a really great tool for self-reflection and to keep grounded on a daily basis. If I find out that I'm not doing that, I tend to feel like I'm sliding backwards.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I also find books that I like to read, and I only read. I don't necessarily sit down and read long parts of books, but I like to. I like to read segments of books. Like I have a couple of books that are my favorite. One is this one called The Little Book of Talent by Daniel Coyle, and it's just it's 52 tips for improving your skills, but they're just so, they're so relevant for just everyday things that you do. And they're short little things that you can read that just make you think, like, how can I apply this to my life? And that just helps me kind of keep the edge sharpened. So that's one thing, I do. And there's another book that I think you all will appreciate called I don't know if maybe you've heard of it, by Stephen Pressfield, called The War of Art. Have any of you heard of that book?
No. I saw shaking heads. I don't think so.
Yeah, I really recommend it because, and I found that very good because the one thing that I found that no matter how much I try to stay focused, composed, and on task, and especially as I am, looking to get more involved with Wayfinder coaching, my new venture, I get distracted from it, or I start feeling senses of negativity pushing back, a sense of doubt. Yeah. Well, the War of Art is all through it's called the break through the blocks and win your inner creative battles. So it doesn't matter if, you're a writer, or if you're an entrepreneur, or if you're an artist. He talks about writing his first book and how there was so much coming against him that he calls that resistance. And so by looking at this book, I started to recognize that, what my resistance to achieving, what my resistance was to be willing to step into the fray that anxiety can cause sometimes. It's all based on fear for me. And this book is really excellent about the different types of resistance. And from reading it, I realized that my challenges all comes from the fear, either the fear of failure, or the fear of taking risk, or the fear of letting somebody down. So that's a really excellent book. And it helped me broaden my horizons and give me some confidence to understand where, these feelings were coming from. So, I think that for me, it's all about controlling what you can control, creating rituals and regimens and methods that work for you. And just understanding that, at least for me, it's a constant battle, but it's one that I can win. And that sometimes you're going to lose, and that's okay too. Some days, I get overwhelmed and I just need to have a break from it. So I'll take a day off from work when I know I should go, but I'm so anxious about it that maybe it's just better not to go and to come back, regroup, do some of these exercises, and then I'll be better off that next day. I always tell my athletes, sometimes you have to take a half a step back to take 2 steps forward.
Coming up on this episode of GuildCast.
For me it's probably harder for me to make the difference than it is for other people, because it's sort of like occasionally I'll entertain myself doing fan art. A lot of my recreational activities, like going to art galleries and the zoo to draw, to people watch and draw, is technically work related, as in it's sort of artistic calisthenics.
Join the Graphic Artists Guild to listen to the full version of this episode at www.graphicartistsguild.org. Thanks for listening to GuildCast. Coming up in next week's episode.
Right, to understand that the clients often don't know what they're asking for. They don't know why they're asking for it. They're just asking for it because it's what is in their standard boilerplate. And to say, like, I'm not going to do this work for hire, and because of that, we can do this rate. And they say, oh, no, I really need work for hire. And you say, all right, well, it's actually going to cost you more. And this is why. Here's the reasoning behind that.
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.